popular Python products, interestingly, it is so popular, especially in places like Europe, that its community can meet separately. Like here in Atlanta, though it's just a few of us that get together, there's a separate Plone group that gets together to talk specifically about stuff that would bore you guys to death about as we wrestle with Plone technology and get it to work. It has separate conferences, events in Europe and the United States and Asia. Anyway, Chris Johnson is the founder of a company here in Atlanta which works with Plone extensively, though not exclusively. And he's here tonight to talk to us about this important Python product and tell us what it does. So welcome him.
All right, waiting on the last bit there to come up. So preface to the presentation, I am not a developer, and I'm not going to show you any code or terminals this evening. I am going to, though, try and give a presentation that is why I think that Plone in the Google Trends should have a trend like Drupal, but because a lot of people don't know of it, they don't even know to search for it, that we don't have that trend right now. So as Brandon kind of framed it on the mailing list, why choose Plone? The title of the talk, an alternative title I've been working with is Reaching Website Nirvana with Plone. We'll go into a little bit of why. Over the last 5 years of working with this product, we've kind of stuck with it and learned to balance things. So just a quick outline. I have a lot of slides. We're going to move pretty quickly and leave a little time for questions at the end. And Brandon, if you can get me
I'm working on it.
thing.
Sorry about that.
So some quick intros. What is Plone? Who uses Plone? What makes everybody happy about it? And then we'll jump into some questions. So a little bit about me. I'm a native of Atlanta. I started a company called ifPeople about 5.5 years ago in Argentina. Through the geeks we worked with there, we got into Python, Plone, and Zope. And I mostly don't come to PyAtl meetings because it's on the same night as soccer. And I like to play soccer. So just a quick survey. How many people here, like, is their main gig is Python programming? Okay, so about maybe a little over half. How many are their main gig is programming but in another language? Most of the rest of you. How many of you aren't programmers? Okay, what do you all do?
I go to Plone meetings.
Okay.
On the network. Yeah.
Okay. You
A variety of different things.
There was one in the back too?
Vision research.
Okay. All right, so a variety. And now, Plone. So what is Plone? Plone is a CMS, content management system. All right, thank you very much.
What's a CMS?
Well, the CMS in sort of basic functional terms lets you edit web pages without knowing any HTML, no technical knowledge necessary here, using your web browser. And this often is used for letting teams of people do it, and it's also a system that knows about itself. So you don't have to, when you have a website and you add a new page or a new folder, you don't have to tell the navigation that you have a new folder. It already knows that that's there. And it also is something that interacts with users. So it is actually generally database driven, and that makes it the interface dynamic. So a little bit more sort of strategic level, CMS supports collaborative production and maintenance of websites. So you can have multiple people doing multiple things, having different roles, which allows you to divide the labor, and provides the tools for authoring content with very simply, basically anybody who can use like a Word document editing tool. And it enables doing these things systematically. So who uses Plone? Well, some fairly big sites that you might recognize. This is Akamai. Apparently the resolution didn't quite work out on that one. So we're quite off here. Discover Magazine. Oxfam, international nonprofit, the Chicago History Museum, and many, many others, including large businesses. eBay, who's not listed here as well, uses it. Several governments are using it, many universities, including a lot that are not listed on there, including Georgia Tech, and as well in media. And if you're interested to know more about the Plone sites that are available, there's about 1,000 that are in our database on plone.net, which is a place where you can go to find people who host it, people who provide consulting on it, as well as some case studies and a bunch of examples of sites. Because one thing you'll notice is all those sites look different, and we'll see in a little bit what Plone actually looks like when you start up. So what is it that keeps Plone, keeps everyone happy here? You can see with Plone on the mind, the Buddha is very calm and peaceful, happiness. So it is an open source content management system released under the GPL. It's built with Python and Zope, and it's quite readily available for most any platform you're likely to be using. We have built-in accessibility, so for those of you who work with government or educational institutions, you'll often be required to meet Section 508, as it's called, accessibility. So this is how, most typically how vision-impaired people are using your site. But the nice thing is that also corresponds with how Google uses your site. So it also comes in handy with search engine optimization. We have a large selection, especially for an open source project, but really for any content management tool, of online and print books. There's actually, sorry, the URL is a little obscured there, but it's plone.org/documentation. The one on the left there is the most recent of the sort of developer books written by Martin Aspelli. On the right there is an end user guide, which has just come out and is available both online and in print. And then just, the end user guide is really a highlight one. It's one that we point a lot of our clients to just because it's, Plone has a lot of features, and this is something that gets you into them easily. Hot off the press, which is actually a great place to start for anybody who's kind of beginning hacking with Plone, is called Practical Plone. And you can just Google Practical Plone, and you can actually order it now. So another aspect of Plone is integration. It is built in with a lot of open standards, so it's very easy, and these are some of the things we do with it, which is integrating online donations, online advocacy, and CRM databases, including a nice little point-and-click mapping of your forms on your site to a Salesforce CRM database. It has pluggable authentication, which means you can basically make the authentication and the database about your users out of any variety of combinations of sources of data for that. In particular, there's already things you can just sort of off-the-shelf grab for LDAP, OpenID, Salesforce.com. You can run your authentication out of any of those things. So security, or lack thereof, is usually what we hear about it on the web. And some people don't like to talk about this for understandable reasons. So as we look at Drupal, one of the things that Brandon highlighted earlier in the Google Trends, we see that they show up here on the top list of companies and projects with the most vulnerabilities. Comparing different CMSs, you'll see here on the right, Joomla, another PHP, MySQL open source CMS, along with Drupal, having a substantially larger stack of problems. And if you look at the stack itself, Zope and Plone are very much smaller than problems you're experiencing with PHP. Sorry, Zope and Python, and even smaller than Perl. Plone is a stable and growing product, so it's OLO stats here showing about the last, the activity, especially over the last 5 years, has been a lot of growth, over 1 million downloads and counting, and we have an active and healthy community, which is really our secret weapon. This is from the International Plone Conference, so once a year we have an international conference, and then there's several regional symposia as well. So there's about 350 people or so gathered in Naples, Italy. And we've got, in 2008 alone, we had 9 sprints, coding sprints, we've had 6 annual conferences, 2 regional symposium last year, and there's at least 2 already planned for this year. There's over 25 user groups, including Atlanta Plone, which is a special interest group of this group, of PyAtl, which we meet on the first Wednesday of every month, and we invite you to join us for a little bit more casual, both casual and presentation-oriented content. You can find us online at #Plone, IRC channel, a lot of mailing lists, or even in LinkedIn and Twitter. We have the foundation, which is actually the owner of the code, which gives us a nice bit of security, and basically they handle a lot of the legal and intellectual property aspects for us. So in terms of features, and here's where we get into actually seeing what Plone is doing for us. We have a rich text editor, of course. We call it Kupu. Don't ask me why. But you'll see sort of all the buttons that you get when you're editing content, and it's the kind of thing that makes it really easy to make links and make things bold and make lists and all that. You don't have to know any code. It also makes it easy to deal with images. Just add an image on there, and you can size it, you can position it, you can adjust the formatting, and do all of that through the web in a very nice visual interface. We have tools for commenting, rating, polls, surveys, RSS feeds. In fact, RSS is very much baked into Plone as is XML in general, and you can turn any search query in Plone into an RSS feed, which is very handy if you want to just give people ways to keep updated on a certain amount of content. One thing that makes a lot of our clients very excited is tools for building forms. Now this is probably something all of you have done a little bit of very boring coding of just writing little form codes. And now we give the tool to the client, to the end user, to basically point and click their way to create any kind of form they want. Add all of the fields and make them required or not, and add inline documentation, all of that. No development necessary. So authentication is one of the areas sort of in general we've already covered. It also has a very fine-grained security system. Now this is really one of the things that sets Plone apart from a lot of other content management systems, is the ability to handle security on a level that's all the way down to a page, an object in the system, and then of course the developers can use those in the applications they're creating as well. We have on the end user level, you can, so for instance, any object in the site, go to the sharing tab, you'll see there highlighted, and basically adjust who can see it, who can edit it, who can view it. And also we have a built-in sort of reviewing workflow process there as well. That corresponds then to our workflow process. So a lot of the clients will adjust the workflow in their site. So sometimes they have interns who control a certain section of the site, but they're not actually able to publish things, so they'll submit it, it'll go through a workflow process, so there'll other people on the site who will be able to review and publish those. Some of them get very complicated when you start dealing with multiple languages, as well as multiple different roles going on in the document production process. As of the Plone 3 versions of Plone, Plone actually ships with some rather simple tools for versioning and staging, which allows people to be editing live content in a staging version, and then eventually just replace out their live content with the edited content, so you don't have any sort of draft, oh, I'm halfway done with this, showing up on your site in the public realm. It's also tracks your history and allows you to roll back when you accidentally delete everything and save it. Another nice thing that, again, very much exciting for end users is no broken links. We do that by having a little link integrity checker here. And so basically using UIDs throughout the site, you can make internal links to all of your content. And as you move things around in the site, just basically very simple copy-paste or cut and paste within the content management system, which is very much like using your file browser on your desktop. You can move things around and not break your links. And then if you're actually deleting something that's linked within the site, it'll pop up this little message and say, are you sure you really want to do that? Live search. Of course, we couldn't ignore the AJAX trends that were going on, and we wanted to bring in some improvements in usability for Plone. So as you start typing in the search window in search box in Plone, you'll start pulling up the what we call live search, the results that filter as you're typing. Makes it really fast to find your content, and especially with a lot of our clients are thousands of documents on these sites, and the ability to find them, we try and set up an intuitive navigation, but at the end of the day, a lot of people are really used to just searching. So we get full indexing of Word, PDF, and Excel files. The words come up here very similar to the Google Suggests, so it's not necessarily even like something that's all that alien to your common web experience. And there's a nice little admin screen for this whole process, which allows you to turn it on, turn it off, and adjust how it works. And as I mentioned, every search can be an RSS feed. So what do we actually do when we're doing Plone? Well, Josh, who's here up in the front row, he's one of our very much real-world Plone guys. So if you have more of some of the technical questions, I invite you to talk with Josh. I will tell you what I know, but that's not necessarily very much. So installing and hosting. It's very easy to get started with Plone. So hopefully you will be tempted by this presentation to go and grab one of the installers. There's a number of cross-platform installers, literally point and click, and you get everything. I actually can't make this work, but I can make build-out work. But these always break for me, but I break everything I use when it comes to software, so that shouldn't be too much of a surprise. But these are really great, and a lot of people are able to use them well. It'll set up everything. It basically just gets you up and running. Get this thing running, go get a coffee, sit down, and before you know it, you'll have your own web editing, content management system and ready to go. This is what it looks like when it comes out of the box. It has a system of templates or skins, as we call them, that provide both the template and the styling to it. So this is our default one. It was I guess built back in about 2004, and the folks who built this, there were 3 founders in the Plone community, and they were really focused on usability when it came to using this content management system. So as opposed to some content management systems where you have like a site that looks nice, but when you actually want to go edit a content, you look like you're doing database administration. When you're using Plone, you're literally right here. The only difference is there's a little edit button instead of not an edit button. So we also ship a second skin called New Plone, so you can switch that up. Or there's a number of free skins online, and a big source for those is plone.org, plone.org/products, and you can search for all kinds of products on there, and literally download that new skin that you find there that you love to your server or to your computer, and you'll be up and running with a new look and feel with no effort. Or you can just rip them out and put in your own one, like most of the sites that I showed at the beginning of the presentation. Brandon, did you? There's nothing on it.
White screen every 15 minutes.
So hosting considerations. So Plone is a little bit different than other systems that you're going to run into, especially folks who are more used to commodity hosting like PHP applications. So the PHP apps that you're going to get out there, $5 to $20 a month, is going to get you, a bunch of providers that are available to you. You're not necessarily getting a whole lot of support in that range. You're not even necessarily getting that much resources in that range, but it's really easy to find PHP hosts. With Plone, one of the key metrics to consider is RAM usage. It is an object-oriented system, and as you start loading all your objects into memory, you do start needing more and more RAM. So 512 megabytes of RAM is a good baseline for that. A lot of people going with the VPS solutions these days, and in particular SliceHost has got a very affordable option there. And with build-out, which anyone see Brandon's presentation on build-out? A couple people?
It's online.
So build-out is the way I learned to make Plone sites, and it's literally like 3 lines on the command line, three returns on the command line, and you've got a site up and running. And I love it. And that's how you can grab one of these VPS servers, set up your account, go in there, check out your build-out, and boom, you're up and running in very little time. There are also people who are using Amazon EC2 for larger sites. And some of the Plone consulting companies you'll see on Plone.net are also offering hosting, so you can actually even filter by that on Plone.net. Tend to be a little bit more boutique and even managed hosting with folks with specialty in dealing with Plone particular issues. So in terms of where to learn more, Plone.org is a wealth of information. Again, mostly their documentation, products, including Plone itself. You can get there both in a sort of tarball format as well as the build-out information. Plone.net is where you're going to find more of the business-oriented information. Who are the businesses providing services? What are the sites that have been built? Plone.tv is one of the things I didn't mention, but basically we've got, I think, at least 4 years of conferences archived there in video format. So you can watch almost all the, a large portion of the presentations and all of the presentations from some of the conferences, which will be everything from how-tos, trainings, tips, case studies, demos, all of that on Plone.tv. And then, of course, we have a live chat community in IRC Dev and freenode.net domain of IRC at #Plone. And on any given day, you'll find a couple hundred people hanging out there. And the community is really a friendly community. So, I mean, that's, I think, what drives me personally in participating in this community is that the people I get to work with on a daily basis are absolutely passionate and amazing. And we have a lot of interesting stories to share through this process. So, I've sort of tiptoed into this community about 4 years ago, and then they said, "Oh, you're not a developer. You should do our marketing." I said, "Okay, well, I'll start there." and have recently been inducted as a Plone Foundation member, which is kind of what they do for folks who are, I guess, have a history of being contributors. And in part that is, I sort of took my non-developerness and said, well, we've got all these great, amazing people here. Why don't we do something together? And with Plone, there's a lot of different ways to do what you do. So whenever you're going to program something, there's a number of tools, and that can be one of the sort of learning curves there that as you start to develop with Plone. And what I find in my role is that we often come up with the same problems, but we go about solving them in one-off solutions if we're not sort of given stimulus to do other things. And so I try and generate that collaborative dialogue so that we can produce things that are replicable solutions. So my sort of diving into the deep end here with Plone was organizing the creation of an e-commerce platform for Plone called Get Paid. And that's been going on for the last couple of years, and now it's become a nice example of ZOAP 3 technologies in use in Plone, and also something that a lot of people have taken advantage of around the world. So it's kind of cool to see how that whole open source ripple and wave goes out there. So if you'd like to get in touch with me, my email address there, our website there has got more information. We do have a lot of news on Plone and open source and other things on our site as well. And I thank you for your time and attention, and we're going to take some questions on Plone. Definitely don't hold back, bring on the questions from any side. One thing I want to do first, though, is just to thank John Stahl, Nate Oni, and Roberto Allende, and the Plone marketing and evangelism team whose slides I stole from freely, thanks to Creative Commons licensing, and Brandon and PyAtl for having me here, and you for listening. So, thanks. Yes?
It's been a couple of years since I've looked at ZOAP and Plone. ZOAP was stuck in a down-level version of Python, it seemed like. Is that, and they seem to be hard reasons why they couldn't go to higher levels, which I really wanted, or the later versions that I really wanted. And then, can you tell me about ZOAP 3, if that ever got off the ground?
Yeah, ZOAP 3 is, so ZOAP 2 was kind of the old number we were on.
When you brought up that installer, the screenshot, it still showed ZOAP 2.
So, right, we kind of use it all now. When ZOAP 2 and ZOAP 3 split, Plone kept running on ZOAP 2, but we started incorporating ZOAP 3 technologies. So a product like Get Paid is actually written almost entirely in ZOAP 3. And Plone is moving in that direction. So a lot of things have been made into using the component architecture. But when you get Plone now, you get ZOAP 2, you get some ZOAP 3, you get 5, which allows you to use ZOAP 2 in ZOAP, or ZOAP 3 in ZOAP 2. So you kind of get that's why I mentioned there's a lot of ways to do things these days. But Plone is actually making a contribution to the ZOAP community in keeping up with Python. I think I heard just a couple weeks ago they had gotten it to run on Python 2.6.
Really?
It's not, I don't think...
Well, that's fine. It was stuck at 2.3 or something like that.
Yeah.
It runs 2.4 right now.
Yeah.
In general. So you have to, the easiest way usually is either download one of the complete packages or to set up the build out using Python 2.4.
Yeah, the 2.4 is like the generally supported one. Does it work on 2.5 too, do you know?
I don't think the Plone works on 2.5 yet.
Okay. I I think somehow, I know there was something around 2.5, but I know they've been able to make it work on 2.6.
And then the other thing that had bothered me at the time was the templating language, or the templating approach. I really don't like the mixing of the programming constructs inside the content, and that seemed to be the approach that Zope used. I'm not sure how much it wound up with Plone. I knew there were there was a later version of templating language that was supposed to be suggested, but
Right, so you got involved maybe when there was like DHTML?
yes.
Right, so that's pretty much gone.
And
And
it was
ZPT,
ZPT,
or
yeah.
page templates is kind of your sort of default shipped with Plone way of doing templates now. And that, I mean, I think it's not, with your content management systems, you want to separate content, presentation, and functionality. And that's just sort of the general best practice. And they do a very good job of, I think, of separating the functionality and the presentation layer. I don't think it's slicing a knife down there and cleanly separating them completely. That said, though, and ZPTs can be, I think, a barrier for people getting into it. It is kind of complex, and it is not necessarily a templating language that any other community uses. And that's, I think, one of the challenges of the Zope stack, is that we have things that don't necessarily translate into other Python communities. But you can now use deliverance with Plone, and that allows you to do some theming in a very simple way with like a rules file, and also to bring in a bunch of other, you can bring in through WSGI other applications. So, for instance, if you have Track and Plone and a Django app, you can use deliverance to deliver the theme across all of those. So, in that situation, you have more of like end user goes to default Plone-looking site, edits the content, but it's presented through whatever your actual your templates and your theme is that was made for the site.
Yeah, I could probably add something historically is when they developed the page templates, which is the ZPTs files, then the idea was that those are valid HTML files that you can actually have a designer or somebody edit and come up with the look and feel, and then somebody who's a programmer essentially fill in the blanks on how portions of the site get filled out and replaced and so on. So it works in both ways. I mean, it is kind of complicated because of trying to be valid HTML. But, I thought it was a pretty neat approach to it.
Have you seen that work in practice? The designers making the design and the programmers making it?
Sort of.
We did that actually
Yeah.
at the time when they were first out. We would have people just edit the HTML, and then we would take that and fill in what they would just put in fake.
I looked at, remember when ZPT, and I started thinking, well, that looks a lot better. But then I still wound up just wanting to keep my Python completely separate and just be able to reference object or IDs within the template itself, which you wound up using Caravel for this kind of stuff. And that it has different approaches for doing.
Well, I mean, I found that if you really separated it out, I mean, the page templates are not that complex. I mean, you're just filling in, repeating on, iterating over something, or filling in a section with something that was generated using your code. What gets tricky is that you can do macros and all sorts of other iterations and if statements and so on in the page templates, and those get pretty hard to follow.
Yeah, I mean, I think we get a pretty good separation by default, but programmers, I mean, if you look at the product selection on Plone.org, there's over 600 products there. So you get a variety of, you get a range of quality with those. There are some things you install and you will hate yourself after that, and you will have to start over. And there are other things which are actually really quality projects backed by a big community, and they're historically, very good products.
Are things like site templates, are they still stored in a database instead of, I mean, because that was always another problem for me, is I'd rather have used my tools instead of having to work within Zope to do stuff.
You can, and generally the way the community has been moving is really, I mean, and what he's referring to is pretty much like you can edit customization files and even scripts and other stuff that you would think to be more like file system objects through Zope, which puts it into the ZODB, the object database. That can still be done, the through the web editing, but all the best practices in development are completely sort of like, that's mostly for emergency small tweaks or whatever.
Oh, really? So you don't?
It's
Okay.
all file system based now and,
Oh,
you
great.
know, in terms of community best practices.
For
There's
that
another
reason.
question back in
Yeah,
the,
it drove me crazy.
yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering how detachable the different parts are, and if you have choice with the database, or if it just, you don't even think about the database, or how does that work?
The nice thing with Plone is you don't have to think about the database. A lot of people have asked about, you know, how can I just switch this out for a SQL-based database, and that's really painful. You can grab a SQL database and make an add-on product or functionality or handle something in another app very easily. There's a product that uses SQLalchemy to do that, and that makes it very good, but it's not necessarily that you're going to necessarily replace everything in Plone. That being said, there is I may need to modify that statement actually. Copeland, who made a product called content mirroring, which will literally mirror everything in your Plone content into a SQL database. He was for various reasons, but then you can actually use Plone as the front-end content editor and anything else to actually make a front-end to it. So you could use any theming language or whatever, but it'll respect workflows, it'll respect the transition histories, all of that stuff. So there is a variety of options, but in general, we kind of assume the ZODB unless you like really have a big motivator for replacing it. But it definitely embraces other apps having their own databases, and especially with like things like user authentication. You know, pull the user ID and the email address from my LDAP and pull their description and their bio from this MySQL database and log them into Plone. I mean, that's fine. Yes?
This might be one of those silly questions. I never wrote a web app, but I observe how it's written in our company. And is Plone only for like managing content, writing articles, or this kind of stuff, or will it be good for a company to develop ability to edit, kind of like access objects in some other database or some other system and display it, or is it overkill? Is the Zope layer, Plone layer, or none of the above? Django would be better?
I mean, it kind of depends. I mean, I was just watching a demo today of somebody who uses a CRM application for all their kind of like partner networks, and they pull all of that into Plone to interact with. I think and partially because they like the Plone interface better, and partially because it gives them more control over the user interface. You could do it in a variety of ways.
So you basically need to have every page in the Plone, or
No,
like
that one wouldn't.
thousand, like
Would it actually?
million objects, and you want to like look for them, browse through them, and modify them.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get, like, if you use Plone to access a bunch of other systems and pull it in, you're not going to get, like, super great speed on your application.
Well, what someone like Copeland does is you don't create a page that goes along with everything in your database. You write one page that pulls in whatever the user's looking at the moment. So there are people that would use Plone for that,
Yeah.
but a lot of
It's
people
not
would just use Zope instead. If they
Or-
didn't have any content to edit, they
Right.
probably wouldn't use the Plone part.
Right. And we, you know, Plone is, there's a big debate, is Plone a framework or a product? Because, I mean, people will do just about anything in it. I mean, you can see just really crazy examples. And a lot of people will, I mean, everybody's got to have their one chance of doing some application that makes absolutely no sense in Plone and then realizing, oh, this doesn't make sense in Plone. I mean, that's part of the learning experience, right? But at the same time, it's also, you know, it also is very flexible. If you're driven around content management issues, or you need some of these features that it's giving you out of the box, it can be easier just to sort of pull things in. I mean, with the adapters, which I think is what you're referring to, Brandon, is like having an adapter that goes and looks in this other database and says, all right, bring it into Plone this way. You don't actually have to move everything into your Plone database. You can pull your content from the different sources.
To build the page. All right, well, thank you very much.